Hi guys, so the start of class, our warm up or our think about, right, because we didn't have to write the answers down anywhere, was to think about where the y-intercept is located, okay, and to answer how we find slope. So I was happy that students were able to tell me that the y-intercept is located on the y-axis, okay? Remember, that's that first point that we find where our line is intersecting the y-axis, okay? And the way that we find slope, or the answer that I was looking for, was by using rise over run, okay? If you notice, guys, my learning target and my success checklist are still the same, okay? We're gonna make a slight adjustment to number 2. When we get there to our note section, I will make sure that we understand what I'm talking about, okay? So my learning target is still determining slope and y-intercept from a graph. And then once we have those two things, we're writing an equation from slope and y-intercept, okay? So my checklist, or the way that I'm gonna achieve my target, is by finding our intercept. We are going to change number 2 to find another good point, right, on my line. We're going to use rise over run to determine slope. And then we're going to write the equation once we have our m and our b. Okay? So in class, we talked about this equation, y equals mx plus b. I asked what this one is called right here with this circle. This is our slope, right? M is slope. And then right here in the box, this is our B. This is our y-intercept, okay? So let's see, go ahead and get your journals. We're gonna take a few notes. Okay, so nice and big in your journal, I want you to write the equation again. Y equals mx plus b, right? We're circling our m, our slope. We're putting a box around the b. Okay, big R, big S, when we think misses, these are all different names that slope can be called, right? So R is going to stand for rate of change. And then S is going to be our regular slope. So if you hear me say find the M, you know I'm talking about slope. If I say find the rate of change, we're talking about slope. And well, if we hear slope, we know to do the rise over run, right? So the way we find slope from a graph is not going to change. We still are going to use the rise over run, okay? So what I want you to know or remember is that Mrs., right? Mrs. Virial makes me write this equation too many times, but that's okay, right? Too many times helps us remember, okay? So M, rate of change, and slope all stand for the same thing, okay? So we come over here to our B. I want you to put a dot and then the word start, because that's my starting point, right? I like to start at my B. That's on the y-axis, okay? Another name in parentheses is the initial value, or the beginning, in which those are all other names or words for the start, right? And then our regular y-intercept, because we still refer to it as that, right? Okay, below that, we're gonna write our 4 steps for our checklist. So our first step is to find your B. In parentheses, I like to put y-intercept, so that way you know if I call it B, I'm talking about the y-intercept. If I call it y-intercept, you know I'm talking about the B, right? This is the one that's going to change a little bit. We are going to find another, what we call good point. Okay, when we get to a graph, I'll make sure to explain or show you what a good point is versus a not good point. right? So if I have those grid lines in the back, right, everywhere those grid lines make a perfect T is a good point, right? So if you notice here where those lines are meeting, that's a good point. Good point. Good point, right? Everywhere those lines intersect and make a perfect T is what we call a good point. Okay, once we have 2 points, we use rise over run for slope. And then our last step, once we have the 2, is to write your equation. Y equals mx plus b. There's our equation again. Circle your m, put a box around your b. Okay, the next thing we're going to go or move to is a Jamboard that has some practice problems for us to work through, some examples. If you look under in classwork, under week 4, it has today's date. If you're an A day, the date will be 9/9. If you're a B day, the date will be 9/10. So let's go find that Jamboard. Okay, so when you open up your Jamboard assignment, you will see this, example 1. When you get yours open, it will already be done for you, the examples. So you'll just have to go and fill out the rest of the slides. Okay. If you notice here on this left-hand side, it tells you to place the points on the graph. So that means you have to drag these and go plot them, okay? Remember, guys, when we are plotting points, our points are labeled X, Y. They're labeled X, Y because I need to go and my first move should be on the X axis and then my Y axis. Okay, so that means that I'm going to have to be at -4 first on the X. Then 1 tells me I need to move in the up or positive direction, right? So that first point, right, we start at the origin, it's got to be at -4 and then up to that 1, and there's my first point. Okay, -2, 2. We start at the origin. I go to the -2 first, move up. Okay, there's my second point. We're going to use this little area right there to determine our rise over run. Okay, so from this point, I'm going to rise up 1, run 2. Okay, let's count them. So it was 1 was my rise. My run was 2. Guys, if you're having a hard time counting those, do your arches. It does help. 1 arch, 2 arches. So I know my M is equal to rise was 1, run was 2. Next step tells me to identify my B. Remember, the B is the y-intercept where it's touching the y-axis at 3. So I'm going to label my B equals 3. Once we have our M and our B, we can write our equation. So our equation is y equals 1/2 x plus 3. Okay, next example, girls, is what we call, girls, I'm sorry, I don't even know if it's a girl or a boy watching. Guys, next example, guys, is what we call a real world problem, okay? It's talking about real life things, okay? So we need to be able to go look at the x-axis and see what it's talking about, number of tickets. We need to go look at the y-axis and see that it's talking about the cost in money, right? So I like to start right with our checklist. I like to start with my B. So I'm going to go ahead and go put my B first. I'm going to move it to be right there on the y-axis, right? Guys, notice that that number is 20. And the way I know that is because you see these little marks, these tallies. Those are counting by 4, even though it's only numbered by 8. See, notice how my scale is going. 4, add 4 more, 8, add 4 more, 12, 4 more, 16. So that's how I knew this one was 20. So I'm going to go ahead and label that. My B equals 20. Okay? I don't have to go find another point because they drew one for me. So now what I've got to do is my rise and run. If you are stuck and you don't know whether you should rise up or rise down, remember we should have drawn our negative sign and our plus sign. Pointing to the plus sign tells me it's a positive line, so I know I need to rise 1, run 2. Use your arches to help you. 1 arch, then I run 2, but be careful. Remember, when I went up 1 time on this side, it really stood for 4. So instead of that 1 at the top, it should be a 4, right? So again, my slope, even though it looks like 1 arch, right? I counted 1. Each little line represented 4. So when I come and plug that in, it's going to be 4 over. My x-axis is going by ones, right? So it's okay that I just count my 2 arches and I get 4 over 2 simplifies to be 2. So if I write my equation out, I get y equals 2x plus 20. The last example we're going to do is another real world problem, and I know that it's a real world because if you look at your graph, you see how your y-axis has a real life situation labeled, right? Water level in feet. Your x-axis is labeled time in hours, okay? So before I start anything, I'm going to do my minus and my plus sign. If my line were to continue to the left, it'd be pointing to the minus, right? So my line is negative. That means that my slope has to be negative, okay? Identify my B, it's already there, okay? So it's right here on my 16. So I'm going to say B is equal to 16. That means at the start, right, before water started draining, we had 16 feet of water, okay? A good point is already located for us. My rise is going down first and then running. So let's go make our arches. 1, 2, 3, and then my run, 1, 2, 3. But guys, notice your y-axis is not counting by ones, right? My scale is going by 2s every line. So when I move up 1 time, it really stands for 2. So 1 time is 2, 4, 6, right? So really my slope is -6 because my line is negative over 3 because my x-axis is still just counting by ones. Okay, so if I simplify that, I get -2. So when we write our equation, y equals -2x plus 16. Okay, guys, make sure you go in and fill in the rest of the slides. There are 5 more to do on your own, and then make sure you do hit submit and get these turned in for a grade. Okay?